We've been taking a look at, this is the fourth week now, just how we need to resharpen the focus as we embark on what seems like a significant year at least, the number 2015, the year 2015. I talked about how as ministries go on, they can become a lot like pencils. They just kind of dull over time. And we got to constantly be resharpening our focus so that we can remain what God's called us to be, as our church's name, of course, is the light of the world. The first week I talked about the fact that one of the things that we need to be sure to be doing as a congregation even more regularly is going out in the community and serving people that are least amongst us, as Jesus would put it, and doing it in the name of Christ. And I had I shared with you the video of the Fraganos, and they talked to you guys about church on the slab, and I was thrilled to see that from that, you hearing what it is that they do, that apparently there's a need on the fifth Sundays of the month for people to go out there and serve, and a bunch of people signed up out there to go and to serve. I guess it would be next week as we have the fifth Sunday here in September. So that's awesome. And that's what it's about, to recognize what the needs are in the community around us and to go serve in the name of Christ. So that was week number 1. Week number 2, we talked about the importance of telling other people about Jesus, that hell is real and separation from God is real, that the way that we're saved is by faith in Jesus Christ. Not about how good we are, not by what a nice person we are, not by how many good deeds we've done in our life, but purely and simply by the grace and the mercy in Jesus Christ that is received and obtained through faith. And so we need to share the message of Jesus with one another. Last week we talked about that it's really important that as a family in Christ, in a growing ministry, we need everyone's efforts to carry out the ministry of the church. If you were here last Sunday, you filled out the time and talent form, and some of you put on there you'd like to be more involved, and Dan Risto's been already started on it this week, but over the next week or two, he's going to be contacting, hopefully through email or calling every one of you who wanted to become more involved and working with you to figure out ways in which you can serve in the ministry here at Light of the World. Because if it's only a couple of the paid ministers that are doing the ministry around here, we will never be what God has called us to be, the light of the world to the world around us. This morning I want to talk to you a little bit more about the logistics of doing ministry here at Light of the World come 2015. And as kind of a basis for our understanding of the message this morning, I thought we'd take a look at Mark chapter 13, 32 to 37. If you've got your Bibles, go ahead and turn to Mark chapter 13. Verse 32 through 37 of Mark 13. No one knows about the day or the hour, not even the angels in heaven, not even the Son, but only the Father. And so be on guard and be alert, for you do not know when the time will come. It's like a man that's going away. He leaves his house and he puts his servants in charge, each with his assigned tasks, and tells the one at the door to keep watch. Therefore keep watch, because you do not know when the owner of the house will come back, whether that be in the evening or at midnight or when the rooster crows or at dawn. If he comes suddenly, do not let him find you sleeping. What I say to you, I say to everyone, watch. Now these are Jesus' words. Jesus admits himself that the angels in heaven, not even he knows when his return will be, when the end of the world will be. It's only in the knowledge and the will of the Father. But his warning to the church and his warning to each and every one of us is to watch and to be alert, to be aware. I think another way of saying that is God's call for the church is, and for us as Christians, is that we need to be careful not to stagnate in our faith and to stagnate in the ministry of the church. Got a picture there of some really yummy water there, right? You know, Jesus identifies himself as living water, okay? Oh, go back to the other one. You're just ahead of me today, Steve. There you go. Well, too much caffeine this morning? All right, so does that look like water of life there? No. In fact, if you're lost in the woods, unless you're like at death's door, you probably won't drink that, and if you do, you'll meet death's door quicker. It's not healthy water. It's not living water. It's stagnated. Water's able to come in, but it doesn't make its way out. The water that's in there says, we like what we're at. We don't have really room for anyone else, and, well, we don't really want to go anywhere. This is just fine the way it is. It's not good water. It's not healthy water. All right, Steve, go ahead. There you go. But now that water you could drink from. Well, sort of. If you're going to drink from unfiltered water, you'd be best drinking from that. It's fast moving. It's being filtered by the rocks and such. And that has water coming in. It has water going out. It's healthy. And that's really what God calls for the church to be, and for us as Christians, that we wouldn't stagnate, but that we would be healthy, and that we would be active, and that we would be on the move. Really kind of saddens me when I see churches become stagnant and die, like that water in that first slide. There's a church just maybe 3, 4, 5 miles south of here. Zion, they have not closed their doors. They're doing it in the next month or two. And what a shame. A church who once had a location in a different area, and they were able to sell that location and buy property and pay cash for it, and everything seemed great about it, but it was too comfortable, right? They didn't necessarily have the ability or the desire or whatever. They weren't reaching out. They weren't bringing new people in and so forth. And the church eventually kind of stagnated, and it's closing its doors. It's actually a very natural thing. It's an unnatural thing. It's a very normal but unnatural thing in the church's life, that churches would sometimes do that. Mainline denominations in America are becoming like that water right there too. Do the research. There's far less people that are part of mainline denominations today than what there were 10 years ago or 20 years ago. Why? Because mainline denominations, even as churches, have the ability, the tendency over time to stagnate just a bit. Because sometimes it's just about what becomes comfortable. Sometimes it's just, showing up to church and doing it the same way week in and week out because it's a natural thing, it's a comfortable thing, it's a thing that we're kind of used to. Sometimes churches are kind of like, you know what, I know everyone there, and I like it when I know everyone there. I know what I'm getting, and people aren't bringing in weird ideas. Churches and church bodies, if you get a large enough influx of people, a bunch of the other people just that have been there move out because it becomes uncomfortable for them. Because we can, over time, stagnate. And as we look to Light of the World in 2015, at 2015 we're going to be a 12-year-old congregation. Certainly not at the point that most congregations stagnate in their life, but we need to be ever mindful of the fact that God calls for us to be living water. Water that or at least a vehicle by which we transport the living water of Christ into the lives of the community around us. Our church is 13 years old now. It'll be 15, I guess, in 2015. But where we've had blessings, we've also had challenges. A blessing that we had real early on as a church is because we kind of grew kind of quickly to begin with. We went from my house to a movie theater to a shopping center and into this facility in 3 years. And we've been here 10 years. Anyone smelling any stagnant water yet? I hope not, but maybe. We've had challenges. We've had this building, we had financial challenges for the longest time. We've had space challenges. From the very first day we opened this facility, our preschool was full. We could have doubled the amount of preschool classrooms back then, especially back then when the community was still even so much younger than it is now, and we could have filled it right to start. Our vacation Bible school for just as many years as the church has been around too. We call it Kids Camp. We have to close it within a day of opening it to the community because there's just not room to take more people in. So it's hard to not stagnate your preschool program. It's hard not to stagnate your vacation Bible school program when there's not room for water to come in, even as there's room to go out. Over the last 2 years especially, the growth has just kind of picked up and accelerated, and we've gotten into the point where even on Sunday mornings, our classrooms out there are getting pretty full, and it's becoming a challenge for us. You see, there's always those times in our lives where we wish we had the ability to do things over. If we could build this church over again, would have done it a little different. Would have done it a little different because we have all this worship space. You could actually fit, I don't think you can, but it's according to the fire department, you can fit like 600 people in here. It'd be cramped. 500 gets to be really, really cramped. But we have a huge sanctuary area, but then there's only like 9 or 10 classrooms to support it and a few offices to support it. I wish if we had it to do over again, we would have had smaller worship area that kind of matched our ability to support it with the GLOW, the Sunday school programs, the adult Bible classes, the high school Bible classes, middle school Bible classes. So we've gotten ourselves in the situation which there's still plenty of room here, but if you were to go back there, and usually it's much worse even during late service, it's crowded. You can't bring people in, and the danger is that we're going to stagnate. Well, we've seen this issue coming in over the last 6 months or so. We've been working to try to come up with a solution in which we have more ability to reach the people that God's bringing to us so that we don't stagnate, but we certainly don't want to get ourselves into the situation that we were in before where money was just so tight that you didn't have the money to have the staff to do ministry. And so I'm excited and happy to share with you today that probably within the last month or so, the lending institution that we use here at Light of the World, Lutheran Church Extension Fund, has approved us to do an expansion. And the executive board about 2 or 3 weeks ago approved us to go ahead and move forward with it as well. It's not a huge expansion. What it's going to do is it's going to add about 25% more space here at Light of the World. But what it does is it adds space. In fact, I think we have some slides. I know they were being a little temperamental. What it's going to do, and you can see that I don't know what color that is. Brownish yellow, beige. What is it? Taupe. Thank you. I almost said taupe. I don't know what taupe is, but I was tempted to say taupe. Just didn't want to sound like an idiot, although I kind of do anyways, I think. But the taupe area is the expanded area. It's about almost 4,600 square feet. And what it will allow us to do is add 50% more educational space to house the GLOW classes and the Vacation Bible School, to be able to expand the preschool. And I don't know if, for those of you who drop off for GLOW, especially during late service, we have the issue where they do worship, where the kids do worship. It's in a normal-sized classroom, and it's just packed. And you can see there at the top of the screen, there's going to be 2 larger-sized classrooms, about 1,000 square foot, almost double the size of our normal classes. And what it will allow us to do is it will allow us to match our needs on the educational side in terms of size with this space here, so that we don't have to look to a major expansion until both worship center and educational space is filled. It'll also allow us to have some additional office space. Last year, we all came together, all of us, as a congregation, and gave a special offering to hire some additional staff because the church was growing. It's been great, and it's been working. I mean, the church is about 13%, 10 to 13% larger this year than last year. That's significant growth for a church that's 12, 13 years old. It really is. Unfortunately, he has to work out of his car because the part-time person, Dan Risto, that we've hired to do additional work for this year, and with the growth, we're going to have even more additional part-time work next year. There's no place for him to. Seriously, he sits up in the cafe half half the time. There's no place for them to be. So this expansion actually gives us 50% more classroom space, 50% more office space, and I'm just really excited. I hate, that's what it's going to look at like from the side. Where the playground area is, that playground area is going to be moved, and now the educational side will go all the way out to the to about where the sidewalk is right now. I'm not one of those pastors that likes to build just for the sake of building. To me, a building is a necessary evil. You need the building to be able to do the ministry of the church. And if you don't, then you become like that body of water that just stagnates. And God has not called us to stagnate, but He has called us to be the light of the world. And so we will continue to be. Now, 2 years ago, I asked for a special offering for the congregation that was going to go to restructure the debt of the church so that we could lock in at lower interest rates. And you know what? That was kind of the start of when a lot of these blessings from God took place, because just a lot of good things happened as a result of it. And the Lord blessed us through all of our efforts coming together as the body of Christ. I mentioned that last fall, I mentioned that we need to get some additional staff here at the church, and we all came together, and I think combined we came up with like a $60,000 special offering. And that's allowed us to have additional staff this year, and money has not been a stressor. I'm going to put a challenge in front of us today for a special love offering this fall. Can you go back to that picture that shows the floor plan? There you go. So the second room from the top, this is when Rich always says, you should really have a laser. The second one from the top, I'd kind of like for us to get together and to adopt that room and make that a special room in memory of a special person. This last May, like 4 months ago, a tragedy befell a family in this congregation. This beautiful young girl, Parker, died in her sleep in May. Parker was a part of our 6th grade confirmation class. Parker was living and being raised by her grandparents, Skip and Patty, because Parker's mom tragically died a few years earlier. And in her sleep, for, I say natural causes, though there's nothing natural about a 6th grader dying, but she passed away. There's a condition that runs in the family that can, much like high school or athletes that go out and exercise and their heart stops. They've had issues with a similar type thing in their family. So Parker passed away, and I was talking with Skip and Patty yesterday, because after Parker had passed away, and as we were kind of moving down this direction, I kind of threw out to them, how would you feel about if we as a congregation would come together and do a room in memory of her? And they were receptive of that when I mentioned it a while back. And then once we were approved for the loan and the executive board moved forward with doing this expansion, I let them know that was the case and asked them to come in, and we talked a little bit yesterday. And I'm going to have them talk to you guys here in a second, but when I spoke with them yesterday, we talked about a few things. In the first is this, because we tried to make sense out of a beautiful young 6th grader dying as she did. And one of the things that I shared with them is oftentimes it's through death that God brings His love into people's lives. And that seems weird, but it's not. Because if you think about it, isn't it through the death of Jesus Christ that God brought love into the world's eyes and allowed the world to realize what a loving God He is? If you think about it, when you think about like the spreading of Christianity, it was through the death of those who were faithful to God, the martyrs, who in a way that in their life they weren't able to spread the message of Jesus Christ, in the same way that through their death they were able to spread that message, and Christianity just took off with even much greater speed. So it's often through death that God draws people to him and helps them to understand his love for them. And with that, then, kind of a second point that I talked to him about is sometimes we can reach more people in our death than in our life. And Patty was sharing with me that she had just found just a few days ago this extra Facebook page where people are still talking about Parker's death, and then we're talking about different things here, and Skip's like, yeah, I don't think many people at Light of the World really knew her. Patty's like, oh, don't be so sure. This one family just called me this past week, and I was like, a person touches way more than what we realize. There's so many tributaries to a person's life. I said, I remember when I was in college, two different people dying when I was in college. One worked at a convenience store and was killed when it was robbed. Another kid committed suicide. I'm 41, I remember that. People who knew Parker in sixth grade, they will never forget Parker. And that not only affects how they understand life, but that's going to affect how they raise their children and how they process life, the shortness of life, and the things that Parker held important to her, like sharing the love of Christ with others and in God in her life. All these things are kind of interconnected, and they go on, and sometimes they go on much more as a result of death than they do in life. You guys kind of follow what I'm saying? This congregation was blessed through a series of unfortunate deaths, which I shared with them yesterday. For those of you who've been around longer, Roms, you guys will know this story. So there's this family that was with us for a short period of time, Richard and Susan Fox. And Richard and Susan Fox weren't members of this church, but their niece and nephew were. And so Richard and Susan's grandchild and the daughter and grandkids were visiting their house one day many years ago, and their youngest grandchild, a 2-year-old, found his way out the back door and fell into their pool and drowned. I did not know Richard and Susan at that point, but I knew their niece. And their niece called and said, listen, my aunt and uncle just had this happen. The child probably isn't going to make it, has been taken to cooks. Will you go and be with a family, and would you even consider baptizing the child? And I said, yes, I would. And that was the hardest thing I've ever done in ministry, was baptizing this 2-year-old that was on life support. Now, Richard, at that point, was probably, Tammy, in his 50s already. He had never been baptized, and they weren't churchgoers. Susan had gone at some point earlier in life. And where most people might sit there and take something like that, and either the guilt associated with that happening at your house, or just the fact that it happened and God would allow that to happen, many of us can envision someone hating God for that. Guess what? Richard and Susan were in church then that next Sunday, and every Sunday thereafter. And I baptized Richard in his 50s. Richard became a very active person who found Christ later in life and developed a passion to share Christ with other people. He became a lay minister, an elder of the congregation. And about 4 years after I baptized Richard, I buried Richard, because the Lord took his life, and what many of us would say prematurely, because he had got leukemia and died 3 months later. His wife, Susan, tied his life insurance policy, and it paid for 3/4 of that sign that's out front. It just so coincides about the 2 years that we've had that sign out front that the growth of the church is, just really started taking off again. Because of a grandbaby that died, that brought an older man to faith, to be baptized, to dedicate the few short years left he had in life to share the message of Christ, to at his death, he lives on, and his desire to reach people for Christ lives on through a sign that is now doing ministry for the church. it's almost like that story of like the butterfly flapping its wings down in South America and creating all these different things that can't even begin to be understood. And I really believe Parker's another one that her life is going to have all these different effects in so many different ways that we can't even begin to understand. Because that was the third part of what I kind of shared with him yesterday when I talked to him, is this concept of Romans 8:28. And we know, and I'm skipping Patty, I apologize, this was the passage that I was trying to quote to you, that I was not doing the best job in the world saying it from memory. But then we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. It's what we hold on to as Christians, that in all things God will work for the good of those who love him. And I've seen that in Richard's life. I've seen that in so many people's lives. And I know as well we're already seeing it in Parker's. And so it is my desire that that as we have 25 or so kids in confirmation this year, 6th and 7th grade confirmation, that we have a room that is in memory of Parker. This is Parker's ceiling tile. You know, in 6th grade, Tricia used to only have them do this in high school, but in 6th grade, she started allowing them to do this, and so Parker did this in 6th grade before she died, and it sits there in the high school room. It is my desire that in that room that I showed you, that this would be a room that has middle school confirmation, and probably will also be, since it's a larger room, have glow worship, but it'd be a room that's dedicated to the memory of Parker. It would have her ceiling tile there, and we'll put a plaque in there that's going to tell a little bit of her story. And for those of you who don't know her story, I've asked Skip and Patty to come up to just share a little bit about Parker's story, so that for those of you who didn't have the opportunity to know Parker can understand why she was such a special girl, and why we're wanting to do this room in memory of her. So Skip and Patty, if you're able to and you're comfortable with it, why don't you guys come on up, and I'm going to grab a microphone real quick. I guess come up through this way, and you can come on up here. And I know, Skip and Patty, that this is not going to be an easy thing for you guys to do, but it's a way for us to help understand Parker in a way that not only were we never able to understand her, never will be with her passing, but by you sharing this with us, we can just understand what a beautiful girl, not only that she was, but she continues to be, as she's received her eternal reward in heaven. So, Patty, you're going to try it? All right, here you go. Just talk straight into it, because it's hard to hear unless your mouth's fairly closed.
Okay. Can you hear me?
You can use this if you'd like.
As you know, Parker stood for 3 things, and you can see that on the tile. She had always wrote with hearts, which represented her love for everyone. And then she also had peace and harmony, which was the peace sign. Parker was all about peace. And then her life with Christ, which was represented by the cross. And so in the 5 short years we had with Parker living with us, she's the one that brought us to church. We had lost a son, we had lost a daughter. I had been searching for a church, but wasn't able to find one. And Parker said, I want to be baptized. She just drove me crazy. So I finally found our home here at Light of the World. And her dream came true. On her 10th birthday, she became baptized. And this was the beginning of her Christian journey. Between church service and confirmation classes, she learned about the Lord and our faith. And she always invited her friends to church. She was very proud to be a member here. She's always willing to talk to him about her love of God and what he meant to her. And one time in the car, she had a bunch of friends with her, and I was playing Christian songs, as I always do, and she was singing along with the music. And her friends were like, how do you know these words? What is this? And she was proud to say that I listened to Christian music, and she also liked it. And she would then have me put on one of her favorite Christian CDs, Jamie Grace, I'm a God's Girl, That's What I Am. And if you haven't ever played that, please play that for your kids. God saw her, Jamie Grace, in concert, and she just loved her. So one time in confirmation class, there was a group of men that came to speak about their past history with drugs, alcohol, abuse, living on the streets, and other terrible issues they had. And she was so moved that when I got to church, she said, "Please buy me this cross. I have to have this cross." And I came in here and I searched, and I saw a lot of crosses I liked, but the one she picked is not the one I would have chosen, but here it is. And the reason she chose it, it had a heart on it. And I think the heart really stood for her mother. And so when we got back into the car, she just started crying and crying. And she said to me, "I always thought I had a hard life. I thought I had a terrible life." And I knew what she meant with the death of her mother. That's all she thought, was her life was bad. But she said, "I really have a great life. I have a wonderful life. And now I know it, because these guys' lives were so awful, but my life is really good." And this, to me, was the turning point with her love for God. And so she thanked me for going to confirmation that night. And she said, and I said to her, I said, "You know, Parker, sometimes it's just such a pain to get you to go to church because you want to sleep in, or you just don't want to go to confirmation class, just like any child does." And she turned to me and she said, "Never give up. Always make me go." And from that point on, Parker was always talking to her friends about Jesus and what he could do for them. And one of her best friends, Treasure, even asked to be baptized because of Parker's influence. She was never afraid to invite others to church. She was never embarrassed to talk to people about her faith. She loved singing the Christian songs. And once we went to see the story, and they were doing the adopt a child in the back. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. And Parker's like, "God's telling me I have to adopt this child. And I have to tell you, it's not a child I would have picked." And I was like, "Parker, what about these?" And she said, "No, God wants me to adopt this child, and I am still today paying for that child." But most of all, Parker did bring us all back into the church. She brought our family back into the church. And it's not just Skip and I that made Parker's life what it was, but it's because of Pastor Greg. It's because of Tricia. It's because of Trey and the band, and Dan, the congregation, and all the children in confirmation class, especially Reagan, who always made Parker smile, that made Parker who she was. And I'm never going to be able to thank everyone enough for their support, their love, their prayers to get us through this difficult time, as painful as it's been. But I have no doubt where Parker is today. And it gives us, our family, a peace to know that Parker is with God forever and ever.
Hi, my name is Skip Walbridge, but my grandchildren refer to me as the old geezer. So that as parents, you always hope that you have some kind of impact on your children and you can help focus their lives. But in Parker's case, Parker actually had an impact on our lives. And while we would like to have been around to have her around for us to direct issues, that we weren't able to do that. But one thing that I learned after Parker's death is that, when you see your children, you see them in a certain light, you don't actually see how other people see them. And so while I was around, I always enjoyed being around her because she was always really positive. She was always really up and buoyant. And the one thing I liked about, I always had an issue with all my children, is that I went through transactional analysis and tried to teach them empathy for other people. And in Parker's case, I didn't feel like there was anything for me to really do because she was always ahead of me and everything. And then her friends always referred to her as Positive Parker. And her interest in life was built around the church, and it was a reflection of her relationship with Christ and her life. And she kind of had her own identity, and she was intransigent about her ideas. And if she disagreed with me or we had a disagreement, I knew it was just my exercise of trying to change her mind was just wasted because she had her own ideas about where she was going and what she was doing. And I realized that probably the worst thing I could do was try to impact her life anyway, because she had an idea of where she was going and what she wanted to accomplish. I thought the best thing for me to do was to step back and let her deal with her own issues and go down her path. But I'll tell you, I want to thank Greg. You know, Parker liked Greg. Who knew? I mean, you know. But she really enjoyed coming to this church. She enjoyed her relationship with her friends, and this really made her whole life complete. And I want to thank all of you. And I think this is a real honor for Parker, because whatever comes of this is she earned it, not us. And so I want to thank all of you.
Thank you, sir. You know, I love Skip and Patty, and I want us to do this to honor them. I want to do it to honor Parker, but I also want Parker's passion for Christ to live on, even in the same way that Richards does, by inviting people to church. I want people that walk into this new junior or this middle school youth room to see the plaque every sixth grade confirmation class and ask, what's this about? Why is this person up there? And that will give us an opportunity to tell them life is short. We don't know how long we have, and it's real important to tell other people about Jesus, and that was what Parker did with her life, the short life that she had. And something else that Skip mentioned today that I think kids nowadays need to hear is that Parker was real big on, if you're going to have faith, live it. And you should be able to see that in every aspect of your life, how you talk, what you wear, how you treat people, and so forth. And that's a message that I want middle schoolers to hear for years to come. You know, the Bible says in Philippians chapter 1, verses 3 to 6, I thank my God every time I remember you. In all of my prayers for all of you, I always pray with joy because of your partnership in the gospel from the first day until now, being confident of this, that he who began a good work in you will carry it into completion until the day of our Lord Jesus Christ. Paul thanked the Philippians for their partnership in the gospel. I thank all of you for your partnership in the gospel as we embark on LOTW 2015. I ask for your partnership as we, as the last part of this sermon series, try to seek to raise a special love offering in addition to the offerings that we normally give to dedicate this room to Parker. The ushers, if you so choose, will be handing out commitment cards if you desire to make a pledge. And on the commitment card, there's two boxes you can check. One, yes, I'd like to make a love offering. Once again, this is supposed to be in addition to what we normally give. And you can check that, and there's offering plates here at the front for you to put a special offering in if you'd like to contribute to this room for Parker. And then the second box says, yes, I'd like to, but money's tight a little bit right now, so I'm going to pledge this much, and I'm going to pay it by this date. I'm going to tell you right now, that's the one I'm going to check, because this month in particular, things are tight for me. So I'm committing personally to 2 additional months worth of tithing to go towards this room, and I'm going to pledge to have it in by October 31st or November 1st. If you want a card, do not feel obligated to. If you want a card and you're willing to make a pledge to this and make this happen, please raise your hands. The ushers are handing those out. And then while that's going on, let's have the praise team come up. I know it's 10:15, we're 15 minutes over, but once the praise team gets up here, we're going to close in song. And while the closing song is being played, if you want to come and drop your pledge card and or check off in the plates, you're welcome to do it then or to do it when we're dismissed.